It takes 20 hours or more high above the clouds. A flight from one world to another, to a land of intrigue and mystery, where sometimes there are more questions than answers. And where an American family says someone's gotten away with the perfect crime.
When I was first told by the FBI agent, I remember I was so upset. I was actually sick.
A beautiful woman and her dashing fiancé, both in the prime of life. Then, in a house on a quiet road in Thailand, it all ended in a hail of bullets. Tonight, a story of tangled romance, jealousy, and death in one of the world's most exotic locales. A mystery to some, but to American and Thai law enforcement authorities, a case of twists and turns that perhaps have allowed people to get away with murder. The story begins in a decidedly less exotic place, Providence, Rhode Island. If you had to describe him to somebody who had never met John, how would you describe him?
Happy, go lucky, and loved life. Loved it.
Cheryl Rebello is the younger sister of John LaChapelle Jr. She and her father, John Sr., are holding on to memories of a brother and son who was always the center of attention.
Everybody he met, he had to talk to. I don't care where we went. If you took him to a restaurant, I swear he knew half the restaurant before we left the place.
Yet from the family photos taken when he was a boy, there are glimpses into a lonely childhood. After his parents divorced, he was raised by his father.
One time he was little, he said, Daddy, he said, you know, my mommy don't want me, my grandma's upset with me, and he says, you're the only thing I got. He says, please, he says, you know, just always be there for me.
He was a product of the 70s and 80s. John lived fast, drove hard, and got his kicks in sports cars and motorcycles. After graduating with honors from high school, John modeled in print ads a few times. He joined the Army, where he served as a paratrooper. Then, while he was home on leave, he ended up in deep legal trouble. He was accused of raping his girlfriend. He denied it, but accepted a plea bargain for second-degree sexual assault.
He involved a girlfriend that he caught a 7-year deferred sentence on that. He never went to jail for that.
His family says it was a difficult time, but he put it behind him, and a few years later, he was about to get engaged to another woman. Then, tragedy.
She got killed in a car accident, and he cried his heart out, and she was pregnant, and she got killed on his birthday. And from that point, women were like a grain of salt to him.
He had lost his true love.
It would have took him a long time to trust himself to love, I think, because he was hurt so terribly from losing Maureen.
He had on and off girlfriends and married for a brief time when he was in his late 20s. But for the next decade, he put close relationships aside. Except for one companion who he'd hoped for even as a child. A pet monkey. He named him Jacob.
Jacob, he thought, was his son.
His son?
Yeah, that's what he called him, his son. That was his son. He had him for years. I mean, it was comical together. I mean, he slept with him.
He slept with him?
Oh, slept with him every night. He bathed them all the time. He ate and drank like a human being. I mean...
Seriously?
Seriously, it was...
Right up at the dinner table?
Oh, yeah.
John came to be known as the Monkey Man. Eventually, he got into contracting and real estate, turned all his energy to business. He lived in this house on a lake in Connecticut, and he always wanted more.
He wanted achievement, and the money came with it. So he was always trying different stuff.
And that search for money and opportunity led him to Thailand. Thailand, where John LaChapelle Jr. found a whole host of ways he hoped to make money. He started an export-import business, dealing with, among other things, teak wood furniture, building materials, even coffee. John bought a house in Thailand, and he flew back and forth from the States at least 4 times a year.
He loved it there. He would have moved there if it wasn't for his monkey. That's all he talked about. He absolutely loved that place. He thought it was great.
Business, it seemed, was booming, and John's family says he had a goal that looked within reach.
He'd be like, I'm going to retire when I'm 50. I'm going to retire when I'm 50. And I remember he used to say, well, what if you don't make it to 50? And I'm like, you're missing the best part of your life. And he would always say, well, I have to work now so that when I'm 50 I can do what I want.
And with John so focused on his goal, other facets of his life were on the back burner.
I would say he would be a hard person to date because he's always driven to work. He was always working.
In Connecticut, though, in 2003, John met an attractive young woman through mutual friends. Her name was Dara Panasi. She was 29 when they met, 9 years younger than John. She grew up in Connecticut and attended business school in New London. John thought she was a knockout.
Dara was very pretty, and I saw what he saw in her immediately.
But that wasn't all. She was a real go-getter, savvy in sales and marketing.
Dara was very bright. Johnny used to brag about her all the time as being very, very bright, and how sharp she was. He said, I finally found somebody, he says, that is willing to work as hard as I am to make money.
Dara moved into John's house in Connecticut and started working with him. In fact, they told friends and relatives that they'd gotten engaged. Here they are on Christmas Eve 2005 at John's sister's house. They seemed happy. But then, just 10 months later, while John was working in Thailand, his sister got an early morning phone call at her home in Rhode Island.
The phone rang. Oh, God, I knew instantly I had this, I don't know what it was. I remember just screaming and jumping out of bed and running, get the phone.
Before you even answered the phone?
Because my phone never rang at 5:30 in the morning.
Cheryl's dread was well placed. Half a world away, gunshots had broken the still of a quiet Thai night. It was the early morning hours of September 28, 2006. In a small Rhode Island town, John LaChapelle's sister Cheryl got a phone call from her brother's fiancée, Dara Panasi, in Connecticut.
And she was like, Cheryl, your brother's dead. And I remember I just was screaming, and I remember falling to my knees.
Halfway around the world in a land of quiet villages and gentle breezes, an evening's calm had been shattered. It was a warm, humid night. At his home near Chiang Mai, Thailand, 43-year-old John LaChapelle Jr. was standing in the kitchen and talking on his cell phone. Someone walked up the front path and went through the side garden.
He walked behind the house, looked into the kitchen door, saw John LaChapelle standing there on his cell phone without a shirt on.
Special Agent James Lawton of the FBI.
He aimed the weapon at John LaChapelle's back. He fired. The round hit John LaChapelle in the back. He fell to the floor. Put a new round into the weapon, aimed at LaChapelle as he lay on the floor bleeding to death, and finished him off.
John's body was discovered by this woman, his business attorney in Thailand named Oi. He saw his body on the floor.
In the kitchen.
There's
And
blood all over the place.
yes, correct. And I shocked, so I went out and telephoned to police.
So you're the one who actually called police.
Yes.
The Thai police moved quickly to investigate. They searched for clues and motives. At first, nothing seemed to make sense. But according to his attorney, there was reason to believe John's business dealings in Thailand might have something to do with his murder. What was his reputation here in Chiang Mai?
People know him. People try to run away from him.
People tried to run away from him. Why? Because he was a bad businessman? He didn't pay his bills on time?
Yes, correct.
He made enemies.
Yes,
Lots of enemies.
a lot.
The Thai police had their work cut out for them. They interviewed business associates, friends, and former friends. Meanwhile, back in the United States, John's family members tried to comprehend their loss. Overcome with grief, Cheryl thought back to the last time she saw her brother, a few weeks earlier when he was preparing to leave for Thailand.
Every time we'd go out to dinner, 2 days before I would go, and I would do my ritual of begging him not to go, and
You begged him not to go.
every time.
Why?
Because I always thought something would happen to him there. I don't know, he was never scared of anything. So I always thought he'd get himself in trouble.
And the last time they had dinner, she said, her brother didn't seem himself at all.
He had never been upset before he left to Thailand, and this time he was upset when we had gone to dinner.
Why was he upset?
He was under stress. He was having problems with somebody out there that was working for him. He was really upset over that, and I had never seen him like that, so I was more nervous that he was going here.
It seems one of John's employees, his administrative assistant, a man named James, was angry at him over a paycheck dispute. In fact, Cheryl had a chilling phone conversation with James the morning she learned about the murder, before John was even officially identified.
James is just screaming in my ear, "I didn't kill him."
James, the
Oh,
assistant.
yeah, he's screaming at the top, "I didn't kill him, I didn't kill." And I'm like, what the hell are you, what, like, would you stop screaming in my ear?
So he's screaming
This
in
is
your
what he's
ear
screaming
over
to
the
me,
phone.
but
I did
I'm-
not kill him, I did not kill him.
Yeah, and I'm like, what do you mean? Well, he's found dead and they're going to blame me and da-da-da-da. And I said, was it Johnny? He goes, I don't know, I didn't see him. So I'm like, James, I need you to go to the hospital for me, and I need you to identify that it's actually Johnny. He tells me, I don't know where the hospital is.
I don't know where the hospital
That's what he
is.
told. I said, you live in Thailand, and you're telling me you do not know where this hospital is.
To Cheryl, the conversation couldn't have been more suspicious, and within months her suspicions were borne out when Thai police got a tip about James. What was the break in the case for Thai authorities? How did all this come together?
An associate of James was arrested on an unrelated charge and came forward and said, well, if you give me a break on that charge, I'll tell you about a murder that I know about. And that was the break that they got.
The informant said a plot was hatched at this nightclub. Here he claimed James asked him to hire a shooter to kill John LaChapelle. But the case wasn't over, not by a long shot. Chiang Mai, Thailand, 2007. 4 months after American businessman John LaChapelle was gunned down in his own home, police got a big break. An informant told investigators that John's administrative assistant, a man named James, had hired a gunman to murder John. Thai police checked the story, and they believe they found solid evidence. FBI Special Agent James Lawton.
So they went out and arrested James.
They went out and arrested James, and they arrested the shooter. And they both confessed.
They confessed.
James confessed to me when I interviewed him in prison.
What did James tell you?
He told me that he'd been insulted by John LaChapelle, that he'd been cheated by John LaChapelle.
So he gets caught, he confesses.
And he confesses.
Both to the Thai authorities and to you.
And to me.
Did his story make sense to you as an experienced investigator?
Perfect sense. Fit.
The murder weapon, a sawed-off shotgun, was not recovered, but on top of cell phone and banking records, Thai investigators had the suspects recreate the crime. Here, the alleged shooter aims another gun in lieu of the missing shotgun. Back in the United States, John's family got the news of the confessions from the U.S. Embassy.
Did you breathe a sigh of relief when you heard that at least 2 of these people were going to be prosecuted in your brother's death?
Oh, yeah, because at first we didn't have high hopes because they said Thailand, the government out there is nothing like ours, and, the police force is nothing like ours. And when it happened 4 months later, oh, yeah, that was a great feeling because I thought, I can't even believe this is happening, that they had caught him so fast.
But there was a lot more to the story, and John's family was about to receive more sickening news.
You don't want to know that, because then you never trust anybody again.
When James gave his confession, there was one crucial detail that would change everything. James also implicated someone else, someone very close to John, and it was really a shocker. John's fiancée and business partner, Dara Panasi. FBI Special Agent Lawton says James gave him a detailed description of the alleged plot.
James gave it up. We went back over his statement, and he told me that he wanted to cooperate and explain to me how the whole thing happened. About a month before the murder occurred, a decision was made by Dara Panasi to hire somebody to kill John LaChapelle.
To kill John?
Yes. She offered him 300,000 baht, which is almost $10,000, to murder John LaChapelle. And this guy, James, went and found a shooter to do the job.
Could James be pointing the finger at Dara to save his own skin?
He was trying to get a break. He was looking at either life in prison or maybe execution. So he was afraid.
So Thai police and the FBI started digging deeper, interviewing more than 40 witnesses. And the more they looked, they believed, the more they found to back up James's story.
What evidence exists that actually ties Dara to James?
Cell phone records, banking records.
Police found wire transfer documents showing Dara Panasi gave an $8,395 payment to James the day before the killing. More money than she'd ever sent him before. In business, Dara and James communicated regularly, but Thai police obtained cell phone records showing a spike in the number of phone calls and text messages from Dara to James during the time the plot was allegedly put in motion. A plot, they say, that was run by Dara in Connecticut.
So you had James' confession.
Yes.
You had banking records showing there was a payment, in fact.
Yes.
And you have cell phone records.
Yes.
To the FBI, the Thai police were putting together a strong case against Dara Panasi.
It's an incredibly thorough and professional police organization. They're no nonsense. and they did a very thorough job investigating this case.
But questions remain. What motive would Dara possibly have? It seemed outrageous. In fact, that's the very reason why the FBI's Lawton was called into the case in the first place. Lawton has investigated more than 24 homicides, and the Thai police needed his help finding out just who this person was. This woman who was accused of ordering the murder of John LaChapelle, an American citizen, in Thailand.
Your mission in this case was to do what?
My mission in this case was to find out everything I could about Dara Panasi and everything I could about John LaChapelle and why Dara Panasi would want to murder John LaChapelle.
And John's family? Well, it turns out they had suspicions all along.
To be honest with you, first time I met her, I didn't care for her.
Why not?
My exact words, and like, they haunt me today. I said, this one will be your downfall.
John LaChapelle was shot to death at his house in Thailand in September 2006. His fiancée, Dara Panasi, was soon accused by one of the suspects as being the mastermind in a murder-for-hire plot, a plot allegedly orchestrated from John's own home in Connecticut. It seemed difficult to believe. They appeared happy. To understand the case, investigators say you have to peel back the layers of John and Dara's very unusual relationship. Most of the time, John lived with Dara at this house on a lake in Connecticut, along with Jacob, his pet monkey. Together, they were running a successful business.
They were making money.
Oh yeah, the whole export-import thing, she thrived on that. Like, she absolutely loved that.
They were a team, in business and apparently romance. She wore an engagement ring, but John's family didn't think they were getting married anytime soon. They thought it all had more to do with business than love.
Why did she have the ring?
Because in this business, she dealt with a lot of rich Asian people. And she said that they were offended by the fact that she was his girlfriend. Like, they dealt better if he said my fiance. So in their mind, they felt it was better if she wore
An engagement ring.
Engagement ring and called herself his fiance because she said it was to do with the culture.
Special Agent James Lawton of the FBI was called in after Thai police pointed to Dara as the mastermind. He was to find out everything he could about Dara and John's relationship.
What do you think the reality was?
The reality, in my opinion, is that he thought that the relationship was about business, and she thought the relationship was about romance.
But there was more. There were revelations about John's life overseas. During his time in Thailand, John LaChapelle was a would-be entrepreneur, a man on the move. He traveled around Chiang Mai brokering deals, going from one new venture to the next. But the word here was he got around in other ways as well. John might have been engaged to Dara back in the States, but in Thailand, he was living the life of a carefree bachelor. Oy was John's business attorney in Thailand. He had the reputation of being a bit of a playboy.
Yes.
He had a lot of girlfriends.
Yes.
And everybody knew it.
Yes. Everyone know that. He's personality playboy.
And was he proud of that? Did he like that reputation?
I told him that if you have many women, you're gonna have problem.
But that didn't stop John from having Dara come for a visit. She met many of John's friends and business associates.
Yes, I know Dara the same time that I know John.
Right.
And John said that this is his fiancée, his administrator, to helping him everything.
So he told you that Dara was his administrator, his
And
John-
fiancée, yes.
And she says even John's fiance knew he had relationships with other women.
Everyone know that. Even Dara, she know this.
Dara, his fiance, knew it.
Yes.
Dara may have tolerated John's womanizing, but according to the FBI, John's latest romance with a Thai woman seemed like more than a fling, and it made Dara furious. Furious enough, the FBI says, to have Dara get James to hire a gunman to kill John.
Well, Dara had been calling him up a lot to try and keep track of what John was doing. Dara called up and said, "Where's John?" And said, "Listen, this guy's no good to me alive. Now, I'll pay you money to murder him."
Do you think she felt like if John continued this relationship with the other woman, that she'd be X'd out of the business?
Yes. As a matter of fact, John had told people that he was going to move his new girlfriend in Thailand back to the United States.
And where did that leave Dara?
That was going to leave Dara out in the cold.
Since the murder, John's family had grown increasingly suspicious of Dara. Just weeks before he died, Cheryl says, her brother told her he was breaking off his engagement with Dara. Cheryl says Dara called her to talk.
So she called afterwards and said, "Did your brother tell you that we're breaking up?" And I said, "Yes, he did." And she goes, "Well, I haven't killed him yet."
I haven't killed him yet.
That's what she said to me.
How much time passed before Johnny was killed?
Like a week and a half.
While John and Dara had broken up, at the time, Cheryl brushed off Dara's remarks as a joke. But now it seems strange, as did Dara's behavior the morning they learned John had been killed. To Cheryl, Dara seemed surprisingly unemotional.
She sat down next to me, and she goes, "Cheryl, I have the will, and when I leave here, I'm going to the lawyer's office."
1 hour after she told you your brother's dead in a very
Right.
cold manner.
And she's telling me,
got the will in her hand.
she's telling me she's got the will in the car.
At your house.
And she's leaving from my house to go to her lawyer. There's no tears, there's no nothing. She's just driving on.
Soon after John's death, his family learned Dara was the beneficiary of his estate, estimated at more than $1 million, including his life insurance.
How much was the life insurance policy?
$500,000.
So she gets $500,000.
Yes.
She gets the houses,
Yes.
the cars,
Yes.
the boats,
Everything.
the business.
All of it.
Did you ever think she was capable of having your son killed?
I did.
You did?
I did.
As the investigation continued in Thailand, John's family ran one of their own at home in the States. Trying not to show their suspicion, they kept in touch with Dara, looking for any signs she was involved.
So me and my dad, we would go out to dinner and I just try to get things out of her. Like, see if we could make her slip up, see if she would say anything, see
Almost
if we...
acting as private investigator.
Exactly, seeing if we could get her to stumble somehow, but I'll tell you, she was like a...
She never gave anything up.
No.
That may have been because Dara had nothing to give up. At least that's what the family had hoped.
I'd actually be so glad if it wasn't her, because to know somebody for 3.5 years and know that you had somebody in your life that was planning to murder somebody you loved, that's upsetting. I would have loved to have gotten that call and said they confessed and she didn't do it.
She had nothing to do with it.
You don't want to know that you knew a murderer for 3 years. You don't want to know that, because then you never trust anybody again.
14 months after John LaChapelle was gunned down, a judge in Thailand issued an arrest warrant for Dara Panasi. The charge, premeditated murder. The family believed justice would finally be served, but they had another thing coming.
When I was first told by the FBI agent, I remember I was so upset. I was actually sick.
months after American businessman John LaChapelle Jr. was shot to death in Thailand, his ex-fiancée, the alleged mastermind of the plot, was still living in Connecticut in John's home. On the other side of the world, Thai authorities charged Dara Panasi with premeditated murder. Authorities felt the evidence against Dara was strong, and she would soon be extradited to Thailand. Especially since they already had confessions from the shooter and John's former assistant, a man named James, who said Dara paid him to arrange the hit. FBI agent James Lawton.
And you're thinking what about this?
That once they were convicted and sentenced, that James would fully cooperate, and the next step in the process is to have Dara Panasi arrested and go through the extradition process.
Finally, in 2008, the two suspects were brought to a judicial hearing where officials expected they would be sent away for life or sentenced to die, since they had already confessed. But just as the proceeding was wrapping up, a stunning development. Both defendants were set free. A judge ruled, among other things, that their confessions had been given under duress. Both defendants were given bail and told not to leave the country while prosecutors appealed. Neither the Thai police nor the FBI could make sense of the judge's decision.
Does that make you suspicious?
Yes.
In what way?
I really can't get into that. That's a matter for the Thai government to address. I will tell you this. The case against them, in my opinion, was overwhelming.
Back home, John LaChapelle's family was speechless.
How did you react when you heard these guys were kicked loose, at least for now?
When I was first told by the FBI agent, I remember I was so upset. I was actually sick.
Johnny's dead, and they're free.
And they're free, after confessing that they killed him.
And what about John's former fiancée, Dara Panasi?
If there's a warrant for Dara in Thailand, why don't they send it your way and say, hey, we want her, pick her up, send her over here?
They were in the process of doing that, but when the shooter and the middleman were let out, what they said is they want the appeal process to go through on the case before they reinitiate the extradition process to get Dara arrested.
Any sense of the time frame on that?
No. And the most frustrating, tough part for me is that there's nobody in jail. That doesn't sit too well for me.
Do you lose sleep over this?
Yes. I think about it a lot.
Have you talked to Dara?
Yes.
How did that go?
Not too well. She lawyered right up.
Did she give anything up?
No. When she said she had a lawyer, that was the end of the conversation.
So she has not given any details as to what her side of the story is?
No.
John's family is worried the men who confessed but were released will take off and never be heard from again. When Dateline traveled to Thailand, we tried to find them and the informer and get their sides of the story. We tracked down James, who was John LaChapelle's assistant, to a small house in a village near the border with Laos on the Mekong River. We spoke to his mother. Does he live here with you?
อยู่กรุงเทพบ้างเชียงใหม่บ้างเขาต้องไปหาแพ็คกิ้งอ่ะ
No, he doesn't live here. Sometimes he lives in Chiang Mai and sometimes he lives in Bangkok because he has to look for work.
James had been there earlier that day. According to witnesses, took off on a small canoe across the river and the border. Within an hour, though, he emailed us asking to be paid for an interview. We declined. Remember, he had confessed, even to the FBI. But now he denied to Dateline that he had anything to do with John LaChapelle's killing. He said he was framed. I would suggest that you investigate how corrupt everything is, and you'll get the answer you're looking for, he wrote. All I want to do is live my life in peace. We also traveled to a small village outside Chiang Mai. We saw where the weekly cockfight is held, and where billiard games break the afternoon boredom. It's where we met this man, the informant who allegedly hired the shooter and who tipped off the police. He was given immunity to testify in the case. What did James ask you to do?
Go find the shooter man for him.
To find a shooter man to do what?
To go kill his boss.
To murder somebody.
To murder someone, yeah.
And who did he want murdered?
The boss of Jim.
The boss of Jim. James says he had nothing to do with John LaChapelle's murder. What do you say to him?
คิดว่ายังไงเจมส์เขาบอกว่าเขาไม่เกี่ยวข้องอะไรกัน
He lies.
We want to get his side of the story. And the alleged shooter, when he saw us approaching, he took off down this road on a motorcycle.
And then we just rushed took off. He don't pull up.
He did not. For now, each suspect is free, and John's family believes something is rotten in Thailand. They've raised questions about the integrity of the Thai judicial system, yet Thai prosecutors say they'll see the case through. Prosecutor Amornphun Khamphunwan.
We want to express our condolences to John's family for what happened. I want John's family to be confident that the prosecuting attorney will deal with the case to the end through the Thai justice system.
But if the case goes to the Thai Supreme Court, as Thai legal observers expect, that process could take years. And now, where's Dara Panasi? We tracked her down too, and she wasn't happy. Dara Panasi is a woman living under suspicion. But now, more than 4 years after the killing of John LaChapelle Jr. in Thailand, the woman accused of paying for the hit, his former fiancé, is walking free, along with the other suspects in the case. And the FBI special agent in charge of the case is increasingly frustrated.
There's a warrant for her arrest, but there's no warrant in the United States.
John's family says they won't rest until she faces the charges.
She's roaming free.
Oh, yeah.
How does that sit with you?
Makes life unlivable. Bothers me every day when I wake up and I know she gets to wake up and do whatever she wants, and my brother does not get to wake up.
She's running that import-export business still.
Yep. I believe that's what she always wanted, was that business. She was obsessed with that business. I believe that was her main goal, to get that. I'm never going to let go of this till she pays the price for what she's done.
The family has appealed to Washington for help. U.S. Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island sent a letter asking the State Department to look into the case. His office told Dateline that the U.S. consulate in Chiang Mai is monitoring developments and conveying its concern to Thai authorities. Reed says he supports the LaChapelle family's efforts to find out the truth and seek justice. So just where is Dara Panasi now? She's moved from the home she shared with John in Connecticut. She faces no charges from American authorities, and Thai authorities won't be seeking her extradition unless the case against the two suspects in Thailand is reinstated. In fact, Dara appears to be moving on with her life. She lives in an apartment in this house in an upscale Boston suburb. And when she returned home one day recently, we attempted to ask her for an interview to get her side of the story. Dara made it clear she did not want to be interviewed about the case. When I said this must be difficult for her, she said, quote, "You have no idea." And she asked us to contact her attorney, Len O'Brien. We did, and O'Brien sent us this letter on Dara's behalf. Dara does want you to know that she was not involved in John's death in any way, he wrote. The letter also says that Dara's only contact with James involved John's business, and she never met him personally. The letter addresses the $8,400 that Dara sent to James right before John was killed. Police say that money was used to hire a hitman. Her attorney says that's not true, that John himself asked Dara to send it from his U.S. account to James's account for business expenses. As for James, Dara says she doesn't know what to believe about him, except that if he harmed John, she had no involvement in it whatsoever. The letter says John kept Dara as the beneficiary in his will, quote, because she remained his closest friend after their personal relationship ended. The attorney also says, quote, John's death shocked Dara and made her extremely sad. Back in Thailand, Dara has at least one defender, John's business attorney, who says the phone calls and payments were indeed regular business dealings and that Dara was not jealous. Do you think Dara had anything to do with John's murder?
No.
Why not?
Because she loved John very much and she know about...
all his girlfriends?
Yeah,
she knew about all
that?
She
knew every time already.
And when Oy informed Dara of John's killing, she says Dara sounded genuinely shocked.
All the time she cried, she cried, and I can hear that all the time.
Before this, Dara Panasi never had legal trouble in her life. But that doesn't mean anything to James Lawton.
I've done a lot of murder investigations, and murder is not always committed by criminals. Sometimes it's committed by average people, and they get overwhelmed by outside influences, by drugs or alcohol or greed. But the most irrational, crazy behavior I've ever seen from normal people is when they love somebody and they've been rejected. And that's what this case is about.
You might remember John was known as the Monkey Man. Now his father and sister don't even know whatever became of his beloved Jacob. All the family can think about now is that John was a loving son and brother whose life was stolen away.
I don't feel like he can have peace until to the people who did this pay the price for what they've done.
How far are you willing to go?
As far as I have to go. I don't think people know what it's like.